When the world locked into ice during the war, survival became a calculation made hour by hour. Anyone who studies those winters knows they weren't footnotes to battles. They were battles of their own. Entire families were pushed past the limits of what a human body should withstand. Heat was a luxury. Food was a memory. Supplies were unpredictable, and every mistake was paid for immediately. Yet the people who lived through those winters didn't fold. They adapted, rethought everything they knew about living, and on the far edge of desperation they learned techniques that carried them through nights of sub-zero cold and weeks where no supply truck or aid convoy ever arrived. What they discovered has value now, not as nostalgia, but as a working blueprint. If you strip away modern comforts, these are the skills that still stand between endurance and collapse. And for the next few minutes, we're going to break down exactly how ordinary families engineered their own survival with methods so effective they deserve to be studied, practiced, and preserved. One of the first strategies that kept families alive was the creation of what soldiers later described as warm cores. When central heating was knocked out, chimneys were shattered and fuel became scarce. People learned quickly that heating an entire house was impossible. They did the opposite. They shrank their living space. Hallways and extra rooms were sealed off with blankets, torn cloth, paper, or whatever material was left. Curtains were doubled, newspapers were pasted to walls, and rugs were stacked on floors to slow heat loss. In parts of Poland and Ukraine, families went further by building small huts inside their own homes. Wooden frames were draped in cloth or covered in hay bales, creating low-ceiling shelters that trapped body heat. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. In a sealed space, even a candle or shared body warmth could raise the temperature enough to prevent frostbite during the harshest nights. Today, that same principle holds. If power fails during winter, your first move isn't searching for more heat. It's reducing the space you need to warm. Food scarcity forced another layer of ingenuity, and it started with relearning the land. When rations failed, gardens froze, and markets collapsed, people returned to knowledge that had carried earlier generations through hard seasons. Communities across Scandinavia, France, and Britain gathered rose hips, nettles, dandelions, and wild greens that offered vitamins no ration booklet could guarantee. In Finland, pine bark was ground into flour and mixed with rye to form a dense bread that delivered calories when nothing else was available. Farther south, families rendered animal fat and sealed it underground, creating an energy-rich reserve that lasted months. These weren't myths or curiosities, they were lifelines. Modern preppers often focus on gear, but wartime experience shows that knowing local edible plants, seasonal cycles, and basic preservation techniques offers far more resilience than any purchased supply. Even today, drying herbs, fermenting greens, or storing simple preserves can extend your food security far beyond the limits of a supermarket. The third major technique that shaped winter survival was underground storage. Before refrigerators and generators, the earth itself became the most reliable cooling system. Wartime families dug root cellars beside houses, beneath barns, or even under collapsed sheds to hide them from confiscation. These storage pits were lined with stones or wood, filled with straw, and covered with soil. Inside, vegetables like potatoes, onions, and turnips stayed edible for months without freezing or rotting. The temperature remained cool but stable, and the humidity slowed dehydration. The method is so effective that it still outperforms many modern setups in long-term reliability. Anyone today with access to a bit of ground or a basement corner can create a modern version of this. A buried metal drum, insulated with straw and dirt, serves the same purpose and preserves food, candles, or emergency fuel without electricity. What kept families alive during the siege months remains fully applicable to current preparedness. Resource scarcity also pushed people to repurpose everything they touched. Nothing was discarded. Clothing was unravelled and rewoven. Tools were reshaped, welded, patched and reforged into new forms. Homes were heated with small stoves built from tin cans, brick fragments and scrap metal. In cities like Stalingrad and Berlin, families built makeshift burners that used tiny amounts of fuel to heat water or cook thin soups. One account from Norway describes families melting snow over a candle, then storing the water in bottles wrapped in socks so it wouldn't freeze by morning. Every object was measured by its potential second life. This mindset remains one of the most valuable lessons from the era. Survival isn't just about stockpiling. It's about the skill to repair, modify, and stretch the usefulness of every tool and material you have. Despite all the techniques and adjustments, the strongest survival factor wasn't a physical object at all. It was cooperation. The brutal truth of wartime winters is that isolation killed. Families who shared firewood, traded small amounts of food, cooked in shifts, or coordinated guard duty improved everyone's odds. In Leningrad, communal kitchens allowed neighbourhoods to ration fuel more efficiently than any individual could manage alone. In rural Britain, families pooled ration cards and supported those whose supplies ran thin. The pattern is consistent across every account. People who built networks survived longer, recovered faster, and entered spring with more stability. For anyone preparing for crisis today, building reliable relationships matters as much as maintaining personal supplies. The families who endured those frozen years didn't rely on luck. They relied on discipline, knowledge, and a willingness to adapt. Their methods remain powerful because they're grounded in practical necessity, not theory or fantasy. If you value historical survival wisdom and recognize how quickly comfort can disappear, these lessons offer a foundation worth studying and practicing long before a crisis arrives. For more deep dives into wartime survival methods and the forgotten techniques that kept ordinary people alive under extraordinary pressure, subscribe to Warfront Survival, share this video, and help keep this knowledge alive for the people who take preparedness seriously.